I want to thank all of you for joining us on this beautiful, unusually sunny day in January. So thank you all for being here. So hopefully you are intentionally at the info session for the Downtown Center planning effort. If not, we will not be hurt if you excuse yourself. But thank you for joining us. I also wanted to mention who is in the room with us today from the Office of Planning and Community Development. Myself, Erica Bush, I'm the lead urban planner and designer on the Downtown Regional Center planning effort. I'm also joined by Jesse London, who helped significantly on this effort, as well as Allison Miller, who is our community planning manager, and Pei Pei Sung, who is on our communications team, who is also supporting us. And then we also have two of the firms who helped in the effort of this work. Agency Landscape and Planning is with us today, as well as BRV. So thank you all for being here to support the exciting stage that we have reached with this effort. So a quick reminder or sort of mention of the goals of today. It's really about understanding what the draft Downtown Regional Center planning plan is, and also to preview how to navigate the plan and provide tools for feedback. We absolutely do want to hear from you. And so this is really to orient you to the plan and engage with it in your own time. If you have questions throughout this presentation, we are going to be asking that those are placed in the Q&A. So I'm going to first, before we kind of dive into things, walk through a little housekeeping about how we're hoping to sort of walk through our agenda today. So as mentioned, if you have questions that arise as I'm presenting today, please do add those to the Q&A. I know often we're usually using a comment or, the chat box, but today we're trying this Q&A sort of process. So please be patient with us. It's the first time as a team we've approached it this way. So this will allow us to better sort of monitor and ensure that we're responding as we can to your questions. Most of the questions we are going to be saving to the end of the presentation, but the Q&A will allow us to interject sort of key points if they're critical to the stage of the presentation that we are in. Allison, did you want to mention anything else about that?
I don't think so, but maybe we want to, I think there's a raised hand with Megan, and if it's something to just sort of like clarify how we're doing this, we might want to address it now. So I'm going to allow Megan to unmute. If Megan has a question. Or perhaps Megan was using, was it
testing
the reactions?
Megan, let us know if you have a follow-up question. Happy to pause. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay. All right. With that, we have sort of a bit to cover, so I'm going to dive into the meat of what regional center plans are for the City of Seattle. So many folks may be familiar with the comprehensive plan. That is our citywide plan that outlines how the city is expected to grow, how we will be reaching our regional growth projections within the confines of the City of Seattle. Our regional centers are really focused portions of the City of Seattle that are planned to accommodate a more substantial share of the growth than other areas. They're designated this way by our regional planning body, which is the Puget Sound Regional Council. And each of these plans are developed and then adopted as an element of that comprehensive plan. So they're sort of one piece of the puzzle pieces that go together to create the comp plan. So what is in these plans? They're goals, policies, and strategies to help guide what the future growth, both residentially and jobs-based in each of these regional centers. They also entail a future land use map. So they talk about the vision for zoning changes in regional center areas. And then they really target strategies and investments in housing, open space, capital facilities, such as transportation plans that are previously mentioned more broadly in the Seattle Transportation Plan. These plans also really guide policies and actions that different city departments will utilize to communicate with one another across departments to develop programs to meet the goals and the policies that are identified within the plan itself. I will also mention we will go into the future land use map in a little more detail later, but there are nuances of how future land use maps are included and spoken to in different regional centers based on their complexity and the goals within them. So what are these projects trying to accomplish? They're really integrating all of these topic areas into a singular package, so to speak. And we go through a pretty robust process of racial and equity focused engagement, technical analysis that touches on each of the elements that are included here that support and communicate with what's being elevated by the community. And then those two sort of compartments, those components are brought together and they in unison develop the vision and policy that's presented in the plan itself. So now I'm going to shift from the regional center sort of planning process to downtown itself and talk a little bit more about how we have the process we've gone through to date and what the outcomes of that have been. So we started the downtown regional center planning process way back really in 2023, but the engagement and plan development kicked off in full sort of spectrum in 2024. So we are actually quite far into this process. And at the tail end of 25, we made our first draft available for public consumption. We are now in what we have sort of identified as the finalization of that plan, which will, from the plan release, include our comment period, which is ongoing right now. And then we will revise the plan based on feedback on its draft and then create a final plan document that will then go through a series of adoption milestones within the city of Seattle regarding council transmittals and briefings, et cetera, with the sort of internal staff here. And then finally, it will be amended to the comp plan, which we are aiming to accomplish in September of this year. We will then be going through a certification process where PSRC adopts this as a regional center sort of stamped plan, which allows us to utilize it for additional funding opportunities. So what sort of is the meat of this plan, the vision and the themes that have been identified? The vision is a really critical element of all of the regional center plans. It's sort of the statement that highlights what this is all about getting us to. And so the downtown plan vision is that in downtown Seattle, everyone feels safe, welcome, safe, and at home. Around each corner, we find our way to and through spaces where every square foot is full of vibrancy, economic opportunity, and beauty. Together, we have found means of stewarding downtown, not just in the moment, but with a dedication and consideration for the next 7 generations. And as we walk through discussing the plan itself, you'll see how discrete elements of the vision have actually been pulled out and are the true sections of each of the elements of the plan. So, as mentioned, one of those themes is that downtown is home. Next is make downtown safe and welcoming, find our way, make use of every square foot, and steward our home for the next 7 generations. These themes not only are pulled out text modules from that vision statement, they are how we've incorporated feedback on the plan and also how we structure the physical plan itself. So downtown is home is really about how we build our downtown into a more of a residential center, how we accommodate the degree of growth that needs to be accomplished in downtown. That's both set by the comp plan and sort of how we fit into this greater picture, but also how we support and invest in the services needed in order to achieve the kind of residential growth that we want. Make downtown safe and welcoming is really about how we create a beautiful and enjoyable environment for people that are in downtown, whether they're here for 5 minutes and they're popping through on their way somewhere else, or they live here or work here every day. Find our way is really about how we navigate through our city, how we feel when we move through spaces. Do we feel safe? Does it feel dynamic? Does it feel inclusive of our greater community? Make use of every square foot is really our economics section. It talks a lot about what we need to do to maximize the utility of our built environment, how to provide more access to creativity, support our culture and economic vitality in downtown. And then steward our home for the next 7 generations is really our environmental section. Talks about not just the infrastructural changes that we need to make in order to support our natural environment, but it talks about how we can increase our capacity to connect with nature within downtown. So how did we utilize and kind of build these themes? We did it through many conversations in many places with many folks. We had 2 phases of engagement to date. These included a number of work sessions, small group conversations, documentations, workshops, and pop-up events. And these were very paramount in developing the vision and policies and actions of our plan. So to that note, we took sort of comments that came up throughout these events and engagement opportunities. We filtered those and identified what key topics and ideas were, and then through those thread them into these planning themes, sort of truncating a lot of those key topic areas. So make use of every square foot, for example, while it is, strong element for our economics, it also is connecting with the desire for additional housing. It's connecting with sustainable systems of funding, and it's connecting with family-focused amenities. So in order for us to meet a lot of in sort of the feedback that we heard from community, these themes aren't unitary in kind of the topic areas that they're hitting on, because we understand that that's not how people experience space. You're not walking down the street and saying, oh, like, I'd feel better if our transportation system right here did this and that and the other thing. It's like, oh, I don't feel comfortable right now. And that touches on many, many facets. And so that's how we've tried to organize the plan itself. So in addition to obviously our public engagement, as mentioned earlier, there's a really rigorous degree of technical analysis that happens that supports and interplays with that feedback that we've heard from community. A lot of the technical analysis that supports the plan is within the appendices. And so if you do want to dive into a lot of the data that supports these key sort of recommendations and policy objectives within the plan, there are key points that are highlighted throughout the plan, but the bulk of the data is within those appendices. And so we really recommend, if that's an area of interest for you, that you go to those appendices and sort of review each of the key areas that support elements of the plan itself. So I wanted to highlight a few of the key data points that did elevate into many of the sectors of the plan. We have within the boundary of how OPCD or Seattle defines the regional center, which I want to also note is a different boundary than some folks speak of downtown. We have the greater downtown, and then we have the regional center boundary. So our boundary is from Denny to the north down to the stadiums and to I-5. Within that area, we talk about who lives here, and we talk about the degree of housing and what that housing looks like. And so to these points, we have a very new housing stock generally in downtown, and we have a large proportion of that housing stock that is serving much smaller housing units, for example. We also call out key data areas within the environmental system, how little porous or impervious space we have in Seattle, in downtown Seattle. We are lacking key amenities. We speak to those amenities and the need for them within our data. So we really do a large spectrum of analysis that's demonstrated within those. So plan development. So we take the community engagement conversations, we take that data, and then again, we pull it together and build the plan itself. So when you review this plan, what you will see are goals, policies, and actions. And what that comes from starts from a big community idea. Downtown development should prioritize housing, not just office space. We take key community points, remove roadblocks immediately and fast track construction, create more affordable and market rate housing, require new tower developments to build additional larger units. These are all things that we've heard. That ties back to a goal. And in this case, it's to add an additional 13,500 new housing units, which also correlates with what's identified in the comprehensive plan for the degree of growth that is needed for downtown to support the kind of transportation system, the kind of pedestrian-oriented residential space that we want to have here. That goal then is supported by a policy that the city would adopt, which in this case is to prioritize residential development in the downtown core. And then we would identify key actions that support that policy and that overarching goal. And so, in this case, some of those actions include prioritizing Third Avenue to allow for more housing types, because we also recognize that Third Avenue looks very different in Belltown as it does, in Pioneer Square, and being more flexible and understanding of what needs might occur along that long stretch. Recommending rezoning of key portions of the downtown core to allow for additional housing capacity, etc. I'm going to do one more example of this. Another big community idea was that there's a lot of opportunity for business in downtown, but the degree of permitting process that is sort of in their way right now is making that very difficult. And so we heard a lot about how people want to open new businesses, they want to expand, they want to engage in the economy of downtown, but it's just so challenging right now. And so that goal really leads back to this idea that we want to support the creation and growth of additional jobs in downtown. A large percentage of downtown employers have less than 10 employees. So there's a really strong connection between, which comes from our technical analysis, to show that if we want to expand our job opportunities, we also have to think about how we make it easier for businesses, particularly small businesses, to open and thrive in downtown. The policy associated with that would be to ensure downtown offers an adequate supply of suitable commercial spaces for small and medium-sized businesses. And then we would identify sort of key actions such as promoting and delivering new small-scale office space options, and having shorter lease term options to allow for some flexibility when smaller and mid-sized firms are still adjusting to what it looks like to open a new space in downtown. All right, plan elements. So these are sort of other big topics that the plan will touch on. One, big ideas. So these are really grounding some specific in place ideas for downtown. The regional center plans are also a place where we can explore really big moves. What are some big investments that we really want to center for downtown, that we want to elevate, and that there's been previous and current energy around? So we know there's been a ton of work for Portal Park in Belltown to explore the opportunity for a publicly created space from the removal of the viaduct and what can that do for the community moving forward. We also have the King County campus, which is vastly underused today. So how do we lean into that capacity to create additional community serving uses? There are also many of these ideas that those of you who have engaged in downtown for years, these will not be new to. But then, we've also added a couple new ideas that were really elevated from particularly our technical analysis, such as the hill climb assists, which through, looking at our landscape, a huge portion of downtown is made incredibly challenging to access due to just the degree of slope in many of, particularly South Downtown. So what do we need to do to sort of adapt our landscape to be more accessible and to be accommodating if we want these spaces to be a livable environment for folks and it's physically challenging to get to and from key spaces? So again, as I mentioned, the future land use map is also an element that we include within these plans, and it does look different in each of our regional centers. For downtown, because of its complexity, our future land use map is much more general. It really talks more about what we are hoping to encourage in regards to future zoning implementation in each of these areas. It doesn't define specific block by block zoning recommendations, which you would see if you were to go look at the draft First Hill Capitol Hill plan when that becomes available to Northgate, because they're smaller and more finite areas. With this plan, we're talking much more about the intention and the sort of vision for how zoning and land use fit into supporting each of these neighborhoods in downtown. We also talk about who and how we're going to implement these things. So in the implementation chapter, you'll see the goals, policies, and actions, but you'll also see which city department would be really stewarding and bringing these efforts to light, and what other departments would be supporting them in that effort. And then a little bit about the timeline. This is a 20-year plan. Are we talking in the next 5 years, next 10, next 15? So I'm about 2/3 of the way through getting there. So just for those keeping track of time, we also recognize that downtown is not a uniform place. It is made up of unique and really important neighborhoods and districts. And so what we did within this plan was call out what we're calling neighborhood snapshots. I also wanted to call attention to the fact that this is one of the first city plans that identifies the waterfront as its own district. With the new and redeveloped waterfront, we now have a much more continuous experience across our waterfront. It's now its own place, where in the way that we often referred to it previously, it was the waterfront tied to Belltown and the waterfront tied to downtown, waterfront tied to Pioneer Square. Really now we're seeing this as a linear place. We need to sort of think about it and support it in that capacity. So I just wanted to note that differentiation. So in these snapshots, what you would see, and also, for those that work in very close focus on key neighborhoods, we thought this would be a helpful way to engage with the plan and what's presented within it. talks about some key data points and some amenity mapping. But then it will also identify all of the sort of key actions identified across the plan elements that pertain specifically to that area. And so if you are having a conversation or you're really focused on one area, instead of needing to go through the entirety of the plan, you can really focus in on those districts. It also calls out the specific transportation project plan or projects that are identified for that district. So if you wanted to have just a quick check of, did they include this project that my organization or I'd wanted to, see in a meeting that I'd participated in, then you can check here and see if that is identified. Okay, we are now moving into the how folks can provide feedback. So I just wanted to do a check. If there were questions that popped up, I should.
There was just one question on kind of defining what neighborhoods are we talking about in terms of downtown, but I think we've covered it in the question itself, and then you were answering it at the same time.
Okay, great.
And excuse me, could I interject here?
Yeah.
There is no Q&A on my screen, so that's what I was trying to say before.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, there's a chat, but it's not functioning. So I think that's where the Q&A was supposed to be.
I see. Okay, thank you. Was there another, did you have a question that we can get to?
Eventually, it was just
Okay.
about letting people know, maybe at the end. Thanks.
Okay, great.
And yeah, maybe we can just interject here to say, again, thanks for patience in terms of us testing out the Q&A function. It seems like depending on your version of Teams, it might not actually be an option. So we'll definitely still let people raise their hand and ask questions at the end verbally. So
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate your patience again. Okay, so for those who may have been tracking this, our comment period was going to end February 2nd. We've decided to extend that till February 15th to allow for more engagement and to ensure that folks can engage the plan. There is a survey that we've developed to help folks walk through the plan, and I'm going to go through that in a little more detail. And then you are also welcome to submit a comment letter to the downtown plan email if that's easier for you or your organization to do. So if you go to the OPCD Regional Centers Planning page and want to open the plan or the executive summary, that you will see sort of in the location circled here. And what we are sort of recommending folks do is to pull up the plan. And then if you scroll down on that same page, you'll see a link to take our survey. If you pull that up at the same time, that's sort of a nice way to be able to walk through the plan and make those comments if you're choosing to use the survey. So when you open that survey, questions 1 through 8 will be sort of quick snapshot of just capturing how you engage with downtown and what your age, sort of some general demographics to help us just understand if we're reaching a diverse audience. And so we can sort of touch base and see if we need to do some more focused outreach. And then after that, when you hit question 8, this will be the specific feedback on each of those elements of the plan that I've talked about today. So if you felt like you wanted to give feedback on the vision statement, you would make that selection, leave your comment in the number 9 about the vision statement. And if you were done, you would then in 10 select, do I have any other questions or comments? Nope. And you would be finished. If you wanted to continue to provide comment on neighborhood snapshots, then you would say, no, I'm not done. You'd select neighborhood snapshots and fill in your comment regarding that portion of the plan in number 9. So you could do that for one or all of the sections of the plans. Or if you just wanted to identify your engagement with the plan and you didn't want to leave any question or comment, you could select that last one and leave it with that. I can pause if there's any. Okay, we've made it to Q&A. So we can jump into folks' questions.
Okay, and I think Pepe is trying to turn up the chat on. I actually can't chat in it, so maybe it's not yet working. So go ahead and have, if you can't find a way to type in anything, go ahead and raise your hand. But we do have a question in the Q&A, which is there going to be a separate process for the zoning changes in the FLUME or the future land use map? And how does that interplay with the future land use map from the comp plan phase 1?
Yes, there will be. So the future land use map and the comp plan, if you kind of glance at it, you'll see that in the regional centers, it's sort of like a step-by-step process. So in the regional, it'll point out regional centers just as this blob. And then we come along and we make our FLUME, which is a further recommendation for what should happen in the blob. And then in 2026, there will be a supplemental EIS. And through that process, that's where we will get much more specific and actually make key zoning recommendations. So that will be happening throughout 26 and into 27, but it will be its own unique process. And if you want more information on that, please feel free to email either myself or the downtown Seattle email, and I can connect you with the folks that are going to be much more aware of sort of the specific timelines and effort on that.
Those are the, so I think I was able to write in the chat. So if you can't find the chat, it should be open now. I see Megan has a hand up. So Megan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, yes, and I just called up the chat and it works now, so I could do that as well. But I was just going to say that in talking to different people around downtown, they were not aware of this process. So it seems that it would really be great to get a wider outreach on this, maybe some messages at council or the land use committee, places where people are going to be expecting to hear this message. Because if you weren't involved with the first process, you weren't on the mailing list.
Thank you. That's great recommendation. We definitely should connect soon with the land use committee. We will be presenting this work to land use committee, but it would be great for them to be able to network that information.
And perhaps the council members, you know, I mean,
Yes.
at least council member Kettle and all the community groups on the Department of Neighborhoods, they have about between 40 and 50 community organizations. So I think that you'd get a lot of response if it was extended to that group. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question in the chat is timeline is my question too. When will timeline be published and any information about the time legislation being shared?
Yeah, we're happy to we'll publish this presentation on our website, and that obviously the timeline in there, but we can call out the timeline pretty easily on the website if that's helpful for folks. And legislation, we will be updating any sort of key dates as well on the downtown regional center site as we shift from the draft to final plan document.
Don't see any hands or additional questions. folks a minute to think.
Well, I just want to say for those of you who are on, we really appreciate your time today. We know that it's really hard to take these moments to be engaged in these types of processes. And it really makes a huge difference to these plans that you're able and willing to listen and be involved in them. You know, we really do genuinely want to hear from all of you and engage in this work. So thank you again. Very good. Okay, well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time. We can wrap it with that, but feel free, again, if any questions or thoughts come to mind that after sort of absorbing this information or sharing it with others, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and our team.